Ultimately, the power is within you. You have the ability to change a circumstance. You have the ability to change your behavior, your mindset. You have the ability and the power to control your life. Hi guys, it's JT here and welcome to the JT Leadership Podcast. A podcast where I take everyday challenges, simplify them and provide you with the tools to overcome any challenge. This podcast has one outcome, and that is to have a positive impact on your life by bringing leadership to your life. Season 2 of the JT Leadership Podcast is about a very important message. It is about something that affects every single one of us, and that is the importance of mental well-being. Throughout this season, I will be discussing why mental well-being is so important and some of the steps that you can take to help build a mentally resilient mind. Things that I've done, tools that I've done and seen other people do, which have had a profound impact and changed our lives. Today's episode will be exploring something a little bit different. I won't be looking at just the tools. Today I'm going to be exploring how the principles of everything I've discussed in the previous episodes of mental resilience applies in real life situations. So essentially that's why this episode is called Mental Resilience in Practice. I'll be doing this by covering some typical scenarios that people face in real life situations, sharing tips and tools on how you can overcome those situations. Remember what I said in some of the previous episodes. I'm not just doing this from what I've read on other people's blogs or websites. I'm doing this from experience in what I've come across and what I've experienced and how I've overcome these situations, and also what I've learned from other people. I've taken that, merged it together, and that's how I've got to the point where I can share these tools that actually work in real life situations with you. So here are some of those scenarios. Scenario 1. What to do when people keep bringing you down. Scenario 2. How to get out of a rut. Scenario 3. What to do when you feel lost. Scenario 4. Work-life balance. Now you'll want to stick around for Scenario 4, work-life balance, because I'm not going to be covering the typical things that you can read online. For example, tips on how to better improve your work-life balance, such as taking breaks and sticking to hours. No, I'm going to be covering something a little bit different on how you can move away from the concept of work-life balance and into a new concept. So just to recap on some of the stuff I've spoken about in the previous episodes, and if you haven't listened to them, I suggest you go back and listen to them because there's some really powerful information in those episodes. I shared some shocking statistics, such as globally, according to the World Health Organization, 1 in 4 people are affected by some form of mental health issue, and approximately 3/4 of all UK deaths by suicide in 2018 were men, and that around 20% of women and girls aged 16 to 24 in 2014 said that they would self-harm. I mean, some of these statistics are shocking, and you'd be stupid to think that you are immune to this. Whether you are not directly impacted, as you might not think that you suffer from some form of mental health issue, but indirectly you might be. For example, there might be a family member, a friend, a colleague, or even yourself who might be suffering some form of mild form of mental health issue. And this is the category I fell into. We look at that statistic of 1 in 4. The average family, that's one person. I then went on to explore the concept of mental resilience. I shared various tools, tips on how you can build a mentally resilient mind, and started to share with you the tools so that you could start your journey to mental resilience. And with that, I explained what mental resilience is. I explained that there's not really a definition for it. So I came up with my own. My own definition was that mental resilience is the elasticity of our mind. It's how far our mind can be stretched and then released so that it goes back to its normal shape. I use an analogy of a rubber band, that when you stretch the rubber band, so when you've been put under pressure and stress and strain, and then when you move away from that situation, your mind can go back to its normal mode of operation. And with that, I discussed how the first step to mental resilience is self-awareness. And then once you move on from self-awareness, you realize that the power is within you. In my experience, I found that often the control is with the person. I know that when someone suffers a mental health issue and they go to see a medical professional, the medical professional will often try some steps that the person can take control for themselves first before they go on to more severe and stronger medication. I truly believe that the power is within us to take control of every situation. We just have to come at it from a different angle. And that's why I want to share with you my scenarios and my situations in reality, so that maybe you can see a different angle. Before I go into scenario 1, I want to just make it very clear that I'm not a medical professional, and that if you are experiencing any form of a mental health issue, you should seek out a medical professional. Also, there are some great organizations out there such as mind.org that have great tips, tools, and helplines that can be there to talk to you if you're experiencing mental health issues. Right, so I'm going to get into scenario 1. What to do when people keep bringing you down. I'm just going to share a story about how I was in that position. So many years ago, I was in a position where I was hanging around with what I would call destructive relationship friends and also colleagues. What I found that was when I was with these people, I couldn't really talk about the things I wanted to do to grow myself and push myself forward, because the people that I was with, they were always looking for a way to bring me back down to earth and say, yeah, you couldn't do that, or you're not so great at that, or no, I don't think that will work. Maybe you should just do it my way. If you've read my book or listened to some of my previous episodes, you would have heard me share a story about an ex-boss I had who actually even said to me to not take a career change because he thought I wouldn't succeed, even though I went on to smash my targets after I left that organization. That's the definition of people trying to bring you down. Whenever you're looking to do something that's forward thinking, positive, and that could positively impact your life, they have a comment, a remark, or take an action to literally hold you back. Being constantly subjected to this over a month, 2, 3, 4, it could be even a year. This could crush your dreams. It could start to suppress your own thoughts. It could even make you have negative thoughts about yourself, so that you stop thinking big. You stop looking for that next step, that positive step that could really change your life or take you in a different direction. In order for you to start to move away from that, you need to understand the difference between constructive and destructive relationship. It's like anything, I try to simplify it. So I put it into 2 categories. You identify the people that you associate yourself with and understand whether they are constructive or destructive. So I've explained to you what a destructive relationship is. This is a relationship with somebody who's always holding you back, who's always got a remark or a comment to put you down, or physically and literally takes action to stop you from progressing. This could be a family member, this could be a brother, a sister, this could be your best friend, someone that you've thought has been your best friend for 10, 15 years, but whenever you're around them, all they talk about is negativity. They talk about themselves. They put their ego before your relationship, so that you don't really have the chance to talk about your dreams, where you want to go and what you want to do. That is a destructive relationship. The opposite is a constructive relationship. This is a relationship where the person or the opposite person pushes you forward. They encourage you to talk about your dreams. They support you in your actions. So if you wanted to start a new business, they support you. They're there. They're like, yeah, that's actually really good. Or if you want to talk about a new idea, they will challenge you. They will ask you questions about your idea. If you're slightly older and you want to go back to school, rather than them saying, no, I don't think you should, maybe you're too old, they're going, yeah, that's great. You could take a career change. They help you look at the possibilities and the options. Essentially, a constructive relationship is one that is based around positivity, connection, and the relationship. A destructive relationship is one that is based around their ego. So in this situation, what did I do? How did I overcome this problem? So I'm going to share with you a tool now. And this tool doesn't really have a name, but you can call it increase, limit, or delete, right? And that might sound a bit formal, it might sound like a task, and that's because it is. So I'm going to share with you what you do. So if you've got a pen, a paper, you've got your phone, whatever it is, you can do this. You can pause this podcast along the way or come back to it later on, and you could do this tool. So this is what I did. I essentially made a list of all the people that was within my circle, the people that I would say that I was talking to, I was spending time with, the people that I'd see every single day, maybe once a month, maybe once a year. And then I would categorize those people into whether the relationship is constructive and destructive. And you don't want to spend too much time thinking about whether the relationship is constructive or destructive. Go with your gut instinct. Just write their name and maybe put a C or a D next to it. It should come to you quite naturally because your instinct usually is correct. So trust your instincts. The next step, what I want you to do is I want you to put your name in the middle and I want you to draw a fairly large circle around your name. And then within that circle, I want you to draw two smaller circles. So essentially you've got your name in the middle, you've got a small circle around it, you've got a slightly larger circle, and then a slightly larger circle than that around the outside of your name. This essentially is the circle of your connections. The inner circle represents the people that you spend a lot of time with. So these could be your parents or your siblings or your best friend. The middle circle, this represents the people that you see maybe every 2 or 3 weeks, maybe once a month. You see them, but not as much as you see your inner circle. And then the outer circle, these are the people that you see maybe once every 6 months. You see them once a year. They're the rare people that you talk to and come in contact with. Now I want you to put the name of each of these people on that circle. You can either do it on the circle, you can draw it, or you can write inner, middle, or outer next to their name. I prefer to do it as the circle because then you can visually see how much time or how close a certain person is to you. Now you can just put their initials and then also write whether they're constructive or destructive. So on the circle, write their initials and then put a slash and write C or D. What you will do is you will start to get a picture of how many destructive people you have close to you and where all of your time is going. So if you're one of those people who are feeling down, feeling like they can't dream big, feeling like whatever they do is not good enough, it could be because you have too many destructive relationships in your inner circle. So for example, you could have your name in the middle and then you could have 3 or 4 destructive relationships and maybe 1 constructive relationship in your inner circle. And then the middle circle, you have maybe 2 or 3 constructive relationships, but 4 or 5 destructive relationships. And then the outer circle, you could perhaps have 5 or 6 constructive relationships. You will start to see this picture and this visualization will form of whether your circle is good for you or bad for you. Now we move on to the next step. This is where you identify whether you need to increase, limit, or delete the amount of time you spend with that person. So for example, if you've got constructive relationships with 2 or 3 people on your outer circle, you want to increase the amount of time you spend with them. Or maybe it could be a phone call or a message. You can start to improve the relationship. The same goes for those people on the middle circle. Like we said, you might have maybe 1 constructive relationship on the middle circle, and you might have 1 constructive relationship on the inner circle. Those are the relationships that you want to increase the amount of time and energy you put towards them. The next category is limit. Now, these are people which are destructive relationships, but you can't really eliminate them from your life. So this could be a parent or a sibling that maybe in your inner circle because you might live with them or you see them every week. But what you want to do is limit the amount of time and energy that you put into that relationship. So for example, if you have a business idea or a concept or a dream of yours, then you want to limit the amount of time and energy you spend discussing it with that person, because that's a destructive relationship, but you can't really get rid of them altogether. Which brings us nicely onto the last category, which is delete. Now, some of these people could be on your inner circle or your middle circle. More often than not, they're going to be on your middle circle. These are the people that you see every few weeks, maybe once a month. But whenever you meet up with them for dinner or drinks, all they're doing is talking about their negativity. They put their ego first. They don't really give you a chance to talk about yourself, your dreams, anything like that. Sometimes these people could be considered your best friends or your longest friends. But really, time has changed. You've grown, you've developed, you've moved on, and they haven't. So it's time for you to really delete them from your life. Now that may sound harsh, that might sound mean or cruel, but in order for you to realize your dreams and your potential, then you might need to do that. So I've done this tool and it worked really well. You find that you have so much more time and energy in your life. You're not spending your time, energy, your resources on those destructive relationships. You end up spending all that time on yourself, so building yourself, developing yourself, growing yourself, and also on the constructive relationships. So you end up having more time and energy to spend on building those, and you end up having better relationships for longer in your life. And that brings me on to scenario 2, how to get out of a rut. So where I am today is I find that whenever I have a bit of a downturn or I feel like I'm in a bit of a rut, I know exactly what I can do to get out of that. There are probably no people in this world that wake up every single morning and they are fully positive, fully driven, fully know exactly what they want to do, because every morning we wake up and our mind is a little bit different. It could be driven by our sleep patterns, what we experienced the last day, what we experienced the week before. But what the most successful and most positive people are able to do is turn that around. So when our emotions are dipping, they know the tools to turn that around. And that's where I am. But it wasn't always like that. Where I was at the end of 2018, I was in a place where I was literally in a rut. I didn't know what I wanted to do. I was waking up late for work. I was in a position where I was low energy. I had low moods. I had a loss of interest. And everything just kind of felt a bit meh. Everything kind of blurred together. The days kind of blur together and they just go. Life just goes. You end up 6 months into the year and you're like, what have I done? I don't really feel like I've achieved anything. And that's where I was. And then using these tools that I'm going to share with you now, it allowed me to turn those situations around. So if you imagine a graph and an axis across the middle, and above the axis is your positive energy, your positive moods, your driven mentality, you're not always like that. It's kind of cyclical where you go up and then sometimes you go back down because you have spurts of high energy, but like everything, what goes up must come down. The main purpose of this exercise is to not spend too much time there. You might spend a day or a couple of hours, but you want to really try and turn that around. You don't want to spend more than a day. Sometimes you just might need a day where you just want to relax and do nothing. That's absolutely fine. But this tool helps you turn that back around quickly so that you can maintain a high energy state, a high motivation state, and be driven. Tony Robbins refers to it as a peak state. So how do you know if you're in a rut? Well, you probably feel the exact same things that I felt. Everything just feels a bit meh. Your days don't come with any sense of purpose or achievement. You might feel tired all the time. You dream of escaping rather than facing your reality. But no matter what you dream of, nothing in your real life circumstances changes, because you don't really take any action. According to Tanya Luna, a psychology blogger, she explains that being in a rut is very similar to dysthymia, which is a mild form of depression, where symptoms like low energy, low mood, and loss of interest can have a serious impact on your brain. If left unchecked for too long, so we're talking about months, close to a year here, it lowers the activated part of the brain which is associated with when people get excited about something, for example, listening to music. Tanya explains it as, you just stop hearing the music. That's just one example of what a rut is. So to explain it in a bit more simplistic way, everything feels a bit grey. The music is playing, the colours are vibrant, but you do not really experience them. So what can you do in this situation to change that? Well, what I did was realise that, well, if I'm in a rut, I did a bit of research and found out that if I'm in a rut, I need to do something different. I need to change what I'm doing right now and increase in variety. And the way I did that was to stop and slow things down. So rather than looking at the big picture and thinking, okay, so what is that big thing that I can do that's going to change everything? I stopped looking for that. And instead, I started to find joy in the little things and said, okay, so what is within my realm of control? What can I control right now? What's within my sphere of influence that can bring variety? And for me, it was to do things like this. So the first thing I started to do was blogging. Blogging about all these tools, the positive energy, everything I share with you now was the first step for that. And that's a tool essentially for you. Is if you feel like everything's just a bit grey, you need to change something. Change something in your life. And I'm not talking about drastic. It doesn't need to be up and moving your life to a different country, although that might be what works for you. But it's just the small things. Like for me, I felt like I had a lot of information, a lot of value, and a lot of experience to share with other people. So I found that blogging was the way for me to do that. So just a bit of a plug here. If you want to go on and read some of my blogs, so there's some really interesting stuff there. It's www.pmgrowth.co. Okay, now back to the episode. What I found was that if you stop searching for the big thing to begin with and look for the little things, you can start to transform the things within your life that you control, and then the compound effect, it'll grow. It'll gradually grow bigger and bigger and bigger till you start making more significant changes, and then increase that variety, which will help you get out of a rut. Now, this brings me on to scenario 3. What to do when you feel lost. Now, this feeling could be the feeling of anxiety, and it seems to be quite common in millennials. That feeling of not being enough, not making an impact. Today, I understand how my actions can positively impact the world. I understand how my behaviors can transform a person's life and positively impact their world. But it wasn't always like that. Early on in my career, I used to get frustrated. I used to feel like I wanted to make a change. I wanted to do something, but I wasn't quite there. I wasn't quite senior enough, or I wasn't quite doing the right thing. I attended a seminar and was coached on my train of thought. I was thinking along the wrong lines. I was looking at the issue all wrong. I was so focused on the big picture that I was missing all the incredible events that were happening around me. So I shifted my focus, and when I did, essentially the anxiety was gone. I was no longer worried about how I can impact the world, and now I had a plan on what I could do to make positive impacts on anything, on every situation, every conversation, every discussion, every video, every episode. I knew and understood how making an impact on one person go on to have a ripple effect. But I understand that that feeling of not feeling like you're making an impact is a problem for millennials. Being a millennial myself, I understand that millennials faced a different mental pressure growing up and now than the previous generations did. Now, this section might be more focused towards the millennials and also their parents. As a parent, growing up, things were different. You were essentially fighting for survival. Majority of millennials didn't have to do this. For example, food, shelter, and love were provided. I'm going to explain Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And if you don't know what this was a concept and a theory developed by Maslow in the 50s, which was such a powerful theory that it still rings true today. Whenever events happen or changes happens in people's life, people's behaviors tend to revert back to Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Now, I want you to imagine a pyramid. And within that pyramid, there are 5 blocks. At the bottom block is your physiological needs. This is your shelter, your food, clothing, your water, air. The next block up is your safety needs, personal security, employment. So this is your money. The third block, so the middle block, is love and belonging. So friendship, family, a sense of connection, love. The next block up is esteem. This is respect, self-esteem, status, recognition, freedom. And then the most upper block, the top of the pyramid, is self-actualization. So this is desire to become the most one can be. So for most of us, and I'm looking at the parents here, when you was growing up and you was working from paycheck to essentially meet your physiological needs. So this was working to pay the rent, working to put food on the table, working to support your family. This met the physiological needs and also the safety needs, employment for a long term to then enable a good pension. And a lot of companies, the government, the media, the marketing never really focused on the upper 3 levels. The love of belonging was having the family life. Once you had that, a secure job and a mortgage, you were set. Everything was done and you had achieved what you needed to achieve in life. Self-esteem, so respect, recognition, This came in small doses in workplaces to enable you to feel a sense of recognition, to meet the upper echelon of the Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And then self-actualization was never really encouraged for most people. Now, if you flip that onto the millennials of today, the physiological needs and the safety needs and the love and belonging of a family have already been met from the moment they were born. For most families were born into a loving and caring home. They were looked after for their physiological needs, and if they couldn't, most governments or states would look after them. Their safety needs would be met because they didn't have to go out working from the ages of 14, 15, 16 for most millennials. And in most circumstances, if you had to, the government would pay millennials or your children, for example, to go to college. If you turned up at college and your family wasn't the most well-off family, you would get paid for that. So if you imagine now that the bottom three categories are already met, there's been no challenges to face that. There's been no struggle, no learning curve for the millennials to face that. They've already started their young adult lives or their current adult lives at the level of esteem. So they're looking for recognition, status, freedom, but they haven't gone through the struggles of the first three categories. And they're already pushing on the boundaries and knocking on the door of self-actualization. So the desire to be the most that one can be. So seeing everything that's on Instagram, social media, Facebook, of all these people who have made it, but not realizing that a lot of these people have already gone through the bottom three categories. So these are the older generations of people who have already gone through those bottom three categories. They've gone through the self-esteem and they're in the top of the pyramid on self-actualization. And that's where the challenge comes. When you haven't had those challenges of meeting your physiological needs, your safety needs, and your love and belonging, and now you're already there, knocking on the door of esteem and self-actualization, as a millennial, you're already starting at the point where you're looking for a purpose. And when you don't have that, or you haven't faced those challenges in life to steer you or create your paths in life or throw up those rocks that you have to climb over, that's where you get to the point where you feel lost and start to feel anxiety. So what can be done? What is the tool? Now this is what I learned. What I learned and what I actually put into practice is that to overcome this issue, this problem, the best thing to do is identify where you are today, what skills you have, what abilities you have, what are your behaviors, and then slow everything right down. Be present in the moment. Slow it down. Once you slow everything right down, you can start to be present and figure out that what can you do right now in the moment. For example, focusing on the conversation with your partner if that's the problem. Really listening to them and make them feel valued. If your team is the problem, focusing on listening and understanding the problems that your teams face and helping them overcome them. If you're worried about the impact that you're making on the world, focus on how the small actions that you take, your small behaviors, are making a huge impact. Focusing on encouraging your friends and family to explore areas outside of their comfort zone. Focus on investing in yourself to expand your mind. If you feel like you're not growing and developing and you're not sure what to do next, self-invest. Listening to this podcast is a form of self-investment. Focus on being grateful for what you have right now, and then focus on visualizing. What is it that you want in life? What is the impact that you want to make? What is the legacy that you want to leave? By doing this exercise, it will allow you to regain your composure and understand what is within your realm of control. Start to take those steps, and then what will happen is you will start to forge a path for yourself. And once you take those steps on the path, you will be presented with opportunities, and it will give you the power to make that decision on where you want to go next in life. When we slow everything down, we start to realize that this isn't a start to finish game of winning. No, this is a journey. And once you start that journey with those small steps, like you're a child, like you're a baby, you start with those small steps, you start to walk your own path. Now, this brings me on to the fourth scenario, work-life balance. And I'm going to do this one a little bit differently. This one's more of a discussion and me sharing my thoughts on work-life balance and how I really think it's failed. the concept of work-life balance has failed. Work and life have always been separate. There's been this ongoing battle and this ongoing campaign for people to understand and fight for this balance between work and life. So you spend hours and hours a day at work, and then you have this balance where you leave work at work and just switch off completely, and then go home and spend all the time with your family or yourself and doing the things that you love, and then going back to work. We've spent decades trying to find the right balance, the balance between your relationships and a promotion, the balance between your colleagues and your wife, the balance between what brings you joy and working extra hours. Is this what we should continue to do? Is it working? Has this concept failed? I believe that the concept of work-life balance has failed. Now, what exactly is work-life balance? I want you to visualize a scale. There's that old image or that emoji that you can imagine on your phone, which is the scale with the two balances, and imagine work in one and life in the other. They're perfectly coexisting, that you go to work, you do the hours, you fight hard for the promotion, you exhaust your energy during the day, all night shifters for your nights, and then you go home and you suddenly have all this renewed energy because you're no longer at work, you're a new person, and you have all this time and energy for your relationships, your loved ones, your kids, yourself, when in reality we know that doesn't exist. As humans, we only have a limited pool of energy every single day, and we wake up. The first thing we do is often we're waking up early, we go to work, whether it be on your own business, whether it be working for someone else. By doing this, you end up exhausting your energy resources through the day. You're making decisions, you have decision fatigue. You've been communicating with 5, 10, hundreds of different people depending on where you work and your organization. And once you leave work, you've now got to come home and you have to renew that energy with your loved ones. In reality, what happens is the work stresses, the work fatigues are carried over into the home life. So the husband, the wife, the partner, the kids, there's not enough energy in the day to share with the family. This can then go on to lead to relationship problems, which then go on to subsequently impact work. So the work-life balance is completely tipped out of scale. Every day it's changing. Some days work's more important, then life's more important. You have to work more hours, you're fighting for a promotion. You have to work those hours, you're not at home. So there is no balance. And often this occurs when people are working because they don't find joy in what they do. They're working because they have to. Like I explained with Maslow's hierarchy of needs, they're meeting the first two categories, the physiological needs and your safety needs. And what happens is, in order to accelerate one, so to tip the scale, you're sacrificing the other. Like I explained, if you're working more hours, you're increasing the weight of the work and decreasing the weight of life. And vice versa, if you're trying to improve your home life, you might not be putting as much energy into work. So you're tipping the scales and you're always sacrificing one for the other. But when is enough enough? So now I want to introduce a concept called work-life integration. This is where you start to find joy in what you do, and you understand that you only have a limited pool of energy and resources throughout the day. So you learn the steps to spread them across the day. Just going back to the part about joy, when I speak about joy, this might not necessarily be your passion, but you find the bits of your day which bring you joy, and you focus in on those. Remember what I spoke about in the previous scenario, slowing it down and identifying where you are right now, and identifying what's important to you and what brings you joy. So that's the tool for work-life balance, moving to work-life integration. Slow everything right down. Identify the areas and aspects of your job and your life which you enjoy, that bring you happiness, growth, passion, excitement, and put those to the forefront. For example, in my career, there's a tendency for people in my position to have a lot of variety in their job, but not exactly niche. And that can be complicated sometimes when you're looking at work-life integration, because you're not really able to narrow down. So what I did is I identified what I could narrow down within my job that really brings me joy. And these are the things such as the leadership aspects, the personal development, helping and supporting of other people, the coaching of other people, the mentoring. These aspects I really enjoyed. And then I looked at the aspects of my life that I really enjoyed. So things like my relationship, the blogging, the podcast, the book, all aspects that allowed me to continue to share and make a positive impact. Then I put these to the forefront. I made sure I focused on doing these more than I did everything else. I put more energy into these elements of my life, and this allowed me to bridge the gap between a balance between work and life and start to integrate it. And this is where you shouldn't really be afraid to bridge that gap when discussing your work with your loved ones. Often people just say, I want to leave work at work, I don't want to talk about it. But that's because we've been conditioned to talk about it in the wrong way. We often talk about the bad things, the negative things, the people that stress you out, the gossiping. This leads to destructive conversations. Remember what I spoke about in part 1, which was all about destructive and constructive relationships. But the same can apply for a conversation. If the conversation is destructive, in terms of it's always talking about your ego or gossiping or talking bad about someone else, then that is a destructive conversation. And that means everything you talk about work is destructive. So to switch that on its head, bridge that gap by making a point of not complaining about your work, but just focusing on the positive aspects. So for example, about myself, when I coach people, when I make a positive impact, I come home and I share that with my wife. I tell my wife about the good stuff that's happened throughout the day. This leads to constructive conversations. And these conversations allow you to bridge the gap between work-life balance and move away from that into work-life integration. Now, I just want to make a point. If you're trying to do this and there are no aspects of your job that you enjoy, then you might want to consider getting another job. Remember, slow it down. Focus on the skills that you're good at. Focus on what you can bring to another person, the value that you can bring, the problem that you can solve, and then look for an area that you can move into. There is endless possibilities out there. And remember what I spoke about. You're on a journey. So if you need to go back and learn a new skill, you need to retool, rebuild your armory, and then go again and forge a new path. You can do that. Okay, wow, this has been a powerful episode. So I just want to quickly do a summary and a recap as I always do. Today's episode, I've discussed dilemmas that I've faced in real life. And these are actually not uncommon. These aren't unique to me. These are common issues that people face every single day. And I want to remind you that what the tools that I shared with you are based on experience and learning. Not just me sharing someone else's tools. These are things that I've actually done and they actually work. So I encourage you to try them if you believe that they might work for you. Like I said, I'm not a medical professional, and if you are experiencing mental health issues, please seek out the help of a medical professional. But if you want to try something different, then please try these tools, as they've really worked for me. I've shared them with other people and they also have worked for them too. I just want to remind you that ultimately the power is within you. You have the ability to change a circumstance. You have the ability to change your behavior, your mindset. You have the ability and the power to control your life. I just want to thank all my listeners and you personally for taking the time and energy to invest in yourself, to focus on your own personal development and growth, and listen to Season 2, Episode 4, Mental Resilience in Practice. I hope these tools have had a positive impact in your life and that you're able to now go on and make a difference in your life. If this episode has brought you value, I would love if you could hit the subscribe button, share it with your friends and your colleagues and your family, because it will really help me continue to share the positive message. If you want to explore more of my work, then you can find me at www.pmgrowth, that's growth.co, which is my website, which I share a lot of my blogs and I continue to share the positive message. You can also read a lot about my leadership principles, the ARE model, in my book Managers Are Not Leaders, which is available on Amazon. Or you can check out my YouTube channel, which is again PM Growth. I share a lot of content on there about tools that can apply in practice and really make a difference in your life. Thank you very much for listening. This is JT signing out.